from LSU football, as former Miami DC Lance Guidry is joining the staff as an analyst, which to me, I think is it's always big news when someone goes from being a defensive coordinator at a Power 4 school to an analyst at another Power 4 school. He was Miami's defensive coordinator for the last 2 years. Obviously, this past season, their defense was not the best. It costed them a handful of games. Even with one of the top quarterbacks in the country, they weren't able to make the playoff. They weren't able to win the ACC or even make the ACC championship game. 2 years ago when he first got the job, the defense was better. But Lance Guidry, you don't want to go too far into it saying big hire, things like that, because it's just an analyst role. But these guys are important to the success of the program. And when you bring in a defensive coordinator in as an analyst, it's always going to, like I said, bring some eyes on it. He's got some Louisiana ties, as he made a stop at McNeese State, where he was the defensive coordinator, associate head coach, ultimately then the head coach. He was the DC at Southeastern in Hammond, and then he was the DC at Western Kentucky and Marshall. He was the Marshall DC before he got the Miami job. He had some success at Marshall. I actually think he was slated to take the Tulane DC job, and Miami came in and intercepted it, and he became the Miami DC instead. So he's obviously got Louisiana ties, and he's very familiar with the state. I'm sure he's familiar with LSU in some sense, being that he coached at Southeastern, McNeese. LSU's the flagship university. But last year, this past season, Miami was 68th in the country, gave up 25 points per game, and against Power 4 opponents, they gave up 31 points per game. So that Marshall defense that he coached was top 10 in the country in 2022 before he got to Miami. And in 2023, the Miami defense was much better than in 24. They had lost a handful of players before. But I was listening to some Miami, people's stuff this morning on the ride in, just to kind of get, the feel for Lance Guidry. And they were relieved that he was fired because there was some miscommunications on the staff and things like that, and they just wanted a clean reset. So that's why I think an analyst role for Guidry right now with LSU is perfect, because this is a guy that obviously knows defense, because at Marshall he had them ranked top 10 in the country. They were balling. He had Miami ready to go when they had the guys. The players and the personnel got mixed up. His staff, there was probably, some miscommunications and things like that. Now he gets to come in as an analyst role where he's helping Blake Baker, who, in my opinion, is one of the best DCs in the country, build this defense into what it really needs to be. And so all in all, I think this is a good move for LSU to bring in.
Anytime you can add a former DC, this was a man that was once on the heralded, and I'm starting to raise my eyebrows a little bit at this Broyles Award list, because he was on he joins Matt House as a first whenever in Matt House's first year as DC at LSU was put on the Broyles Award watch list, and Guidry's first year as DC in Miami put on the Broyles Award watch list. Gets a raise and extension, and obviously you see the Miami defense completely fall apart last year as it was compared to a little bit of the LSU defense in 2023. Where Miami had an elite offense, and the defense is what stopped them from maybe making a playoff push. But all that said, things under Mario Cristobal aren't always what they seem, as that's not the best leadership from what I can see, as he is one that doesn't believe in kneeling the football, just thinks that, maybe not. Let's not take the 100% path to victory. Let's maybe lose if we can, and that did bear fruit. So leaving Miami, I think, for him is probably, obviously, being a former defensive coordinator, being a former head coach, and now he gets to be an analyst. This reminds me of old school, a little bit like of the Saban moves, whenever he would take a maligned defensive coordinator or head coach that is kind of looking for a job, and you're able to hire them as an analyst. And Miami's a private school, privately funded, I guess. So you don't know his salary, but you know that he's getting bought out, and Miami's paying him to come coach at LSU, so you don't have to pay him as much.
Right.
So you essentially get to steal a coach. He gets to be on field as an analyst, and what positions are left to coach on the field for the defense? You have a defensive line coach. Hell, you have two.
Right.
You have Blake Baker, defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. You have a secondary coach.
You have two secondary coaches.
I was going to say, you have a safeties coach in Jake Olson.
Right.
And you have a quarterbacks coach
Corey
Raymond. One position that is an outlier on the defense, star.
Right.
If you want to focus one guy as an analyst on that position, maybe this is your guy. And who do we think will play star?
One, Harold
Perkins.
Yep.
So if you can devote one coach and as an analyst who's a former defensive coordinator from Louisiana, has all of these ties. Obviously, he's probably wanted to coach at LSU since he's from here, from Welsh. And he's coached all around the state, almost took a job at Tulane, gets sniped by Cristobal because they wanted to build Louisiana-like inroads to be able to recruit.
Right, of course.
And now you have him at LSU, where I'm sure he's wanted to be, and you get him for probably maybe a year, but it's a year that lines up with the guy that probably only has a year. And if you can devote one coach to Harold Perkins and get him right in the star position, if that's where he's going to play, I think this could be a kind of a little kind of fox in the hen hole move here.
Yes.
And because I don't think people were very much of – everybody was so excited about the Blake Baker hire, and you saw Kevin Peoples kind of like in the byline.
Right.
And then it became, holy shit, you have a good one, Kevin Peoples. Yeah. And it feels like that's all Kevin Peoples wants to do. Like I don't think he wants to be a defensive coordinator. He just wants to work with the defensive line. And so Blake Baker brought him along, and you saw the difference he made in a year. If you could get anything close to that, and I'm not calling him Kevin Peoples, I'm just saying he has the experience as a DC that if you just focus his attention on one thing, I'd imagine he'd be pretty good at it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like your train of thought there. I think that would be obviously a great move by Baker and the staff. If you're one of the main focuses for this defense going into next season is figuring out what to do with number 7. How do we make this work? Because since his sophomore and junior seasons, it hasn't particularly fallen in line the way you would have liked. And so if you're able to bring a guy in that can help with that specifically, but also add a level of, adding some intensity and more breakdown on the back end to your defense. You're bringing in another defensive coordinator. Me and Lloyd have both said it. That's a big deal because that's a guy that was successful at Marshall, which obviously isn't the Power 4 level, but successful there, and had some success at Miami. And as a defensive coordinator, there's so many different pieces that have to line up to be successful. And whenever you're coming in as an analyst, those pieces aren't exactly, you don't have to worry about all that. You can just kind of worry about defense. And so whether that's the defense as a whole for him or it's just going to be Perkins, I think this is a good move for LSU to bring in and kind of take the defense to the next level because that's the step that needs to be taken. Blake Baker solved a lot of the low-hanging fruit issues, the organization of the defense that was awful in 23. He got that back right. Guys were in the right place more often than not. The communication was much better. He was able to obviously put together a staff that got more. Like, to me, the defensive line, especially the D tackle, Bo Davis and Blake Baker got more with less. They got a lot out of that room, even after the guy that you expected to be your stalwart at that position goes down with an injury. Jacoby and Guillory gets hurt, and you still get a lot out of guys like Gio Paez and Don McKinley and Ahmad Bro and Paris Shan. You were able to succeed there and fix some of those issues that were easy to fix. Well, now you need to take it to the next level. And that's what a move like this does when you bring a DC in to be an analyst to help add to that defensive staff. And I'm all for it. I'm all for it, especially someone that's familiar with Louisiana, familiar with, I'm sure, being at Southeastern and almost Tulane and McNeese, especially, you understand the way football works in Louisiana and the way it works at LSU in Louisiana whenever you're coaching in Louisiana. Like, I'm sure you understand the way the politics of the state work and things like that, where he can even assist in helping Blake Baker in those different ways. I think that this is a great move by LSU to bring him in. I'm excited to see what looks different. And this is the second move LSU has made in bringing in an analyst. They brought in Amon Anand. I think maybe a little over a week ago, for the special teams aspect, which obviously when we're talking about kind of some of the needs going into next season, special teams is something that we've had somewhat circled for a while, where LSU hasn't truly had a special teams coordinator. They have had special teams issues. Now, I will say this season, some of those were solved. The return game, which was non-existent year 1 and 2, you finally had. And to me, that had more to do with the guys that you brought in player-wise than it did staff-wise. I think that it was a lot more Xavion Thomas than anybody else when it came to kickoff returns. But Aaron Burrell, excellent. Damian Ramos was good. Obviously, the punt team is the first kind of point when it comes to special teams. That issue needs to be solved. You hope you solved it with the Middle Tennessee punter that you brought in through the transfer portal, Chadwick, that he can be the guy and you're not having to put Oceandorf in here, Peyton Todd in here, and mix it up. You have some continuity at the position. And so Anand was the assistant special teams coordinator at Penn State and Baylor, and when he was at Penn State, the Nittany Lions boasted one of the top kick coverages in the nation and led the Big Ten in blocked kicks. So, obviously, that should be music to your ears as an LSU fan because special teams-wise, you really haven't been a factor. LSU hasn't, especially on that end. Like, we've been so worried about the offensive end of special teams, with punt, kickoff return, field goal, those types of things. We haven't really even focused on the defensive aspect of blocking kicks. Like LSU hasn't been a factor in those spots. And so if you're ever able to bring in a guy that can help lead and bring some strategy in to make that happen. When he was at Grambling, he was the special teams coordinator last year, boasted a top 25 kickoff and punt return unit under his watch. So, I mean, that's a top 25 kickoff and punt return unit at Grambling, and then when he was the assistant special teams coordinator at Penn State, they had one of the top kick coverage teams, and they led the Big Ten in block kicks when he was there. So that's another move for LSU in a side of the ball that you need to make some changes and figure some things out, because special teams cannot be a problem if you're going to make a push for the college football playoff, which is what Brian Kelly's trying to do. The point is obvious. They're going all in. They're making a push this season. The way they've spent in the transfer portal, Brian Kelly was open and honest about needing money to make those moves. They've done all the things. They got Nussmeier back. They've shown that they are trying to go in and win a national championship next season. It would be awful if that is ruined because of special teams. All the work you've put in, offensively, defensively, roster building, if special teams is the thing that holds you back, that's a problem. And so to bring a guy like Anand in where he's got experience being successful at obviously another Power 4 program with special teams units, I'm not sure if he's going to be the special teams coordinator or what the specific roles will be. That's obviously something we'll see when we get out there for spring football. We'll kind of see what the lay of the land is. Because to me, even though Slade Nagel was the tight ends coach, special teams coordinator, and Lloyd, you can attest to this, as well. When we were out there for fall camp and they were running special teams, Bob Diaco was the guy running those group settings.
I'm over here. I was reading about some staff changes that were made. This is courtesy of Wilson Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote this on the 24th, and I'm starting to put some of these pieces together. So LSU football staff is undergoing several changes under Brian Kelly in his fourth year. The team parted with 6 off-field staff members last week, and as you mentioned, Bob Diaco is now gone.
Right.
He's going to North Carolina. Another special teams analyst who, this is from Wilson Alexander, Kelly credited with designing the schemes of special teams, Lester Erb, is now gone. So a lot of these are 2 names, and so Ahmad Anand, who you've been speaking on, will be added as an analyst who was obviously at Grambling and worked with their special teams, and now Slade Nagel has gone to be Houston's offensive coordinator. But you have Anand, who's going to be a key role in special teams. But you're starting to see some of these guys that were brought in as a part of like BK's original staff,
right,
that are gone. So you're starting to see him weed out even more of the people that he added in his first, I guess, coronation as head coach at LSU.
Right.
He's weeding even more of the guys out. So it's just another step in the direction of, I may have swung and missed on everybody that I brought in.
Right.
Which,
no, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say Denbrock, was
he's
the outlier,
gone.
But he's gone. He takes the Notre Dame job. So yeah, I mean, you've seen really almost a full reset. Like Sloan and Hankton are kind of the outliers where they were brought in originally and they're still here. But I mean, the Polians, the House, the Steeples, the Cooks, the list goes on and on. Where it the original hires were obviously a swing and a miss, and those wrongs are being righted. You saw defensively those wrongs be righted last year. Now the special teams units, they're kind of figuring that out. There is one position coach left. Still no tight end coach for LSU. And I'm honestly a little surprised that it's gone this long. Because, I mean, last year when they were making these hires on the defensive side, the hires were made in what, Lloyd? It was around the beginning of January, or was it around this time?
Yes.
When they were making the defensive hires?
I believe it was at pretty much the middle of January.
Right.
When you started, because people were kind of freaking out a little bit because it was taking so much time.
Yes.
And it was at the time, felt like a laissez-faire approach to kind of filling out the staff, and then you saw everything that kind of came together, and everybody was appeased because it was all the names that we'd speculated on, and to go get Blake Baker, to bring back Corey Raymond, at least that hiring period,
right,
felt like it took a very long time. And then I would say even after the bowl game for the offensive coordinator, you just assumed that after the performance that Sloan and Hankton put up, it was like, okay, they're probably just going to elevate them. That still took a while to announce. But yeah, this is kind of, he slow plays this thing.
Yeah.
And so what does LSU still need? A tight ends coach?
Yep.
And you've heard nothing.
Not a single thing.
Not a single thing. But I'm impressed with the kind of the overhaul of the special teams. That was something that, and now after you listed out what Anand's done at Grambling and what in comparison to what LSU has done,
right,
like this is a massive upgrade. Like even if it's not he's just going to serve as a special teams analyst, I would imagine he's going to hopefully just be get away from this. What was it, like the decentralized approach where, hey, the offensive
group
line
effort.
That's the group. Have you ever worked on a group project?
I hate them.
Nothing gets done.
Yeah,
it's a way to say, hey, get in your groups. Like it's a substitute teacher period.
Right.
Y'all get in small groups and we'll come up with a project, and then the bell rings. Like, oh, we'll get to it tomorrow. Then the teacher's gone.
Yep.
Like we knew we didn't have to do anything. So that's what a decentralized approach was. Now you have somebody that made Grambling good at special teams, and if you give him the talent that at LSU, I'm reading, like Xavier Thomas is gave credit to, excuse me, gave credit to Diaco for giving him the freedom to return kicks. It's like, no shit, buddy. Like that means he's just not coaching you. Like
you were
there was no rule.
Preseason All SEC.
Yeah, like I trust your judgment back there. Like that's not a scheme. Like to be elite, you have to be elite in all three phases of the game, and that's where like championships are won. You see the difference that special teams. That's what makes the difference in winning and losing a lot of these times. Like you could be elite on offense, elite on defense, but when it's two good teams playing each other, those 3 points matter. The field position matters. All that shit matters so much. And for LSU to essentially ignore it for the first 3 years, it's come back to bite you. You don't have to go back with the first year, the first game,
right?
And the first game, it lost you the first game.
Right.
And then for that not to be enough of a like kick in the ass to start focusing on it, didn't happen. We decentralized the approach and what we're going to do. But now it feels like this is at least a move in the right direction. And so LSU making some staff changes that I think could benefit them in the future because they allowed, just looking at, if Burrell didn't kick it out the back, they allowed 22 yards on a kickoff return, 103rd in the country. 103rd in the country, you're LSU.
Right.
Like, you should have studs ringed out on kick. And I mean, we always harken back to the days of Jarvis Landry as a true freshman running down on kick against Auburn. Like, you should have dogs out there. And if you do leave it short, like, go hunt. Instead, you're giving up 25 yards of return and 103rd in the country.
Well, and I'm asking you this, when's the last time you remember seeing LSU block a kick or a punt, and that being a factor in the game? Because I don't think
I have nothing.
Yeah, I can't remember. And so to me, I mean, not that needs to be something that's common. You don't need to be known for blocking kicks and punts, but you should be able to do it here and there by saying, hey, we need to go block this. Here's our strategy of how we're going to make it happen. Go get it. Like Beamer ball. Like
it happened to you.
Yeah, like when you're playing South Carolina, I'm telling you, Shane Beamer looked at that moment where LSU was about to punt, and he said,
"We're going to get us." No, not even that moment. One. He said, "Oh, we're going to get one this week, boys. We're going to get one this week. I guarantee it."
Right.
And sure as shit, he got one, and we saw it. Whatever. I said it as soon as I left the first practice. I was like, "This doesn't get better."
It's taking too long.
I was like, "They're going to give up a blocked punt or something."
Yes.
And even the punting wasn't great, even if you got it off, which is something that still needs to be fixed. And they addressed that issue too,
right?
When you went and got a punter out the transfer portal. But yes, Beamer definitely watched LSU on tape and said this takes way too long to get going. And then that should have, I guess, in a lot of people's eyes, that was obviously a momentum changer, but should have led to a South Carolina win when they were up 17. But that's not what happened because you had Garrett Nussmeier lead an all-time comeback and ruin your season.
Yep. But, I mean, really just the way, with LSU, like, I said and Lloyd just said, where if you're going to be good and you're going to go all in on this team offensively and defensively, you need to do the same thing on the third level. Special teams, you have to apply the same pressure and the same focus because you cannot lose games because of that aspect of the game. Like, I mean, even looking back at the Texas A&M game, bad snaps, fumbled holds, missed kicks, all of it, where those things can't happen. You cannot add fuel to the fire against your own team. And so that's why I think these special teams moves are great. I like the Lance Guidry move to bring in a guy that's experienced as a DC, knows the lay of the land in Louisiana, and is going to come in as an analyst to help Blake Baker and the rest of the staff. So ultimately, I think so far these moves have been great. I'm excited to see what the move is at tight end coach. I really haven't heard anything. There hasn't been much chatter. There hasn't been really many names thrown around with any true weight to them. I do think Kelly's going to bring one in because obviously Brian Kelly put such an emphasis on tight end and that position and using it in his offense. I wouldn't imagine Brian Kelly would, because, I mean, the alternatives if you don't bring a tight ends coach in would be Brian Kelly coaches it.
No, you want to bring in.
They group in with the receivers. And I don't think either of those are what Brian Kelly wants to do.
No, I think you have one more spot for an on-field coach, like a full-time on-field coach, and that's the only position left. It would be malfeasance to not 100%. Bring somebody in. So, like you said, that Brian Kelly has a good feel for the tight end position, probably has great relationships with tight ends coaches.
100%.
And so this could be if it's this quiet, it could be big. So I don't even know what that would entail, but they're going to make a hire, obviously. But I think it might be he's going after somebody that he might be trying to poach. He's trying to go get a kind of a bigger name to help with the tight ends, because when you look at that room, it's no longer Mason Taylor. You're trying to develop guys. So you want that spot to be a premier position that is of focus, whether it's Brian Kelly doing it, which I'm sure he'll have a hand in, but that's where he wants to run the base of his offense is out of like 11 personnel. He likes to have a tight end on the field. So if you can bring in a coach to help develop Trey Green, who's just, well, you'll have to wait because he's playing basketball, but he'll be out there. And then you bring in a freshman tight end. You add another tight end in Bauer Sharp. Like, you have people that need to be developed in what offense you want to run.
Right.
So I would imagine.
Well, yeah, like you said, you have a tight end room, like you said, where Trey Dez, who played receiver last year, 2 transfers, Sharp and Green from A&M.
Yep.
And a freshman. And you just logged a expert prediction from Steve Wiltfong on the number 1 tight end, Ahmad Hudson, in the class of 2027 for LSU to land him out of Ruston High School. And so, obviously, tight end is a position of emphasis for Kelly. You need to have a coach there. And like we said, we haven't really heard any names, but I would assume in the next 2 weeks to hear something.
I would hope.
I would hope in the next week, maybe even by the end of this week.
Well, yeah, because you do have Junior Day coming up this weekend, and then it's February 3rd that's when the dead period starts recruiting.
Right.
And so, LSU was recruited without a coach on staff for a position before. It's not the biggest deal in the world, and I wouldn't necessarily want to bring somebody in for their first day to be like, hey, go meet the recruits.
Right.
Like, you would want to kind of glad hand and ingratiate them in before you give them that task of like, here's a binder, go look through it. These are the guys we want to go get. It's like, okay. And no big deal. It's the number 1 tight end in the country. Don't fuck it up.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's what you should do, but they do need to make a hire. And like you said, you've seen Brian Kelly slow play this process before. And what was the name? Who was his former quarterback that Brian Kelly wanted to bring in as his offensive coordinator?
Tommy Rees.
Tommy Rees was the name that people thought would come in to be a tight end coach. Now he's an offensive coordinator in the NFL.
Right.
So I don't think he'll be coming here, but that might have been his plan A, and this could be a situation in which plan B, he's looking around again.
Right.
So I'm not the most concerned about it, but you better have somebody obviously here before you start practice. But they are kind of going through some training. They're working out. So you'd like to have somebody on staff, but like I said, BK slow plays these things, and with the amount of changes he's made and what they've done in the recruiting world, where he's even been beating the streets, which is, I haven't seen him do this before.
Right.
But he's out on the road recruiting. He's meeting with players, and like I said, you have a Junior Day coming up, this weekend? I believe it's the first one, where they have some it's a mix of seniors and juniors where, you have guys from last year's Junior Day that are now seniors that are coming back.
Right.
And 2 years ago, the world was your oyster. You had Bryce Underwood.
Right.
You had DeCorian Moore, Harlem Berry.
Yeah, it was the
cream of the crop.
It was Christmas.
LSU was getting the number 1 quarterback in the country, number 1 wide receiver in the country, number 1 running back in the country. 1 for 3. But I'll take Harlem Berry. But it doesn't feel like there's that much of a swing in recruiting for this Junior Day, at least as of yet. You have some big-time players, but it's not this massive windfall of the who's who of the nation coming to LSU's campus before they are no longer allowed to visit on February 3rd.
Yeah. So, it should be pretty soon that you hear some news on that tight end coach, like me and Lloyd said. We'd hope. I wouldn't, like Lloyd just broke down the calendar for you. It shouldn't be too long before you do that because you don't want to let it go too long. Because also LSU announced the spring game will be April 12th in Tiger Stadium. And so that means spring football will be coming up in, the next 2 months. And you want to get, if you're going to, bring your position coach in for that group, you want to get him in so he can get down and get working with the guys in his room and get ready. So all in all, the moves that have been made so far by LSU, I think are great. And I'm excited to see once we get to spring football and into fall camp, what looks different, what changes, how LSU improves because of these moves, both defensively and special teams. I think Anand and then Lance Guidry both are big-time gets for LSU in the roles that they were brought in because, like we've said, these are moves you have to make because you're going all in to make a push next year. And everyone's